The Grand Archon of the Velaxian Empire stood before the Galactic Council, his crystalline form pulsing with smug satisfaction as he announced humanity's defeat. The massive holographic display behind him showed Earth's major cities in ruins, a testament to their superior military might. And thus, he proclaimed, mandibles clicking in their species' version of a smile, we declare total victory over the troublesome human race. Their military is crushed, their governments toppled, and their spirit broken. The threat they pose to galactic stability is finally eliminated. 200 light-years away, Commander Rhys Hayes watched the broadcast from a bunker deep beneath the Appalachian Mountains and couldn't help but laugh. It wasn't a pleasant laugh, more like the kind you'd hear from someone who just found out their ex-spouse's new yacht sank. Are they always this dramatic, he asked, turning to the gathered resistance leaders. The bunker's harsh LED lighting cast sharp shadows across their faces, each bearing the weight of a 5-year war that had cost humanity dearly. Dr. Chen, their lead scientist, snorted while adjusting her cracked glasses. Dramatic? The Velaxians make Shakespeare look subtle. Remember when they demanded Earth's surrender by sending a hologram of their emperor doing an interpretive dance? That was a declaration of war, Colonel Rodriguez chimed in. I thought my hologram projector was malfunctioning. The room filled with tired laughter. It felt good to laugh even now, especially now. Hayes stood up from the battle-worn conference table, his scarred hand reaching for the biometric scanner. Well, since they're so fond of dramatic moments, I say we give them one they'll never forget. Dr. Chen, is Project Lazarus ready? The scientist's expression turned serious. Yes, but Commander, are you sure? Once we activate it, there's no going back. The energy requirements alone will alert them to our location. They already think they've won, Hayes said, placing his palm on the scanner. That's exactly what we needed. Authorization, Hayes, Rhys J. Protocol, last rule. The bunker's central column hummed to life, revealing a hidden chamber. Inside, suspended in a field of blue energy, floated what looked like an ordinary quantum processor. Except this one happened to be humanity's final card in a game the aliens didn't even know they were playing. You know, Hayes mused, watching the device power up, for all their superior technology and evolution, they made one crucial mistake. They assumed that because they found Earth first, they were the more advanced species. He turned to face his team, a predatory grin spreading across his face. They never stopped to consider that maybe, just maybe, we weren't building up to their level of technology. We were building sideways. The quantum processor's glow intensified, casting everyone's shadow in multiple directions simultaneously, a visual impossibility that perfectly summed up what they were about to unleash. The Velaxians conquered Earth using the laws of physics as they understood them, Dr. Chen explained, her fingers dancing across the control panel. But humans, we've been breaking scientific rules since we first decided rocks could be tools. Colonel Rodriguez checked his tactical display, showing thousands of Velaxian ships in Earth orbit, celebrating their victory. How long until they realize something's wrong? Oh, about 30 seconds, Hayes replied, watching the quantum processor reach full power, give or take however long it takes them to notice that their understanding of reality is about to get a serious update. The device pulsed once, twice, and then the laws of physics themselves prepared to learn humanity's last rule. Never assume your limitations are universal. 5 years earlier, the day humanity made first contact should have been momentous. Instead, it became a cosmic comedy of errors that would have been hilarious if it hadn't ended with half of Madagascar getting vaporized. The Velaxian ships appeared on a Tuesday because apparently even alien invasions respect the unwritten rule that nothing interesting happens on Mondays. Their fleet materialized just beyond lunar orbit, a spectacular array of crystalline vessels that looked like someone had given a geometry textbook a god complex. They're hailing us, announced General Thompson at the UN emergency session. And according to our translators, they're complimenting our atmosphere. No, wait, they're demanding we give them atmospheric property rights. The UN Secretary General rubbed his temples. They want to buy our air. More like they're trying to foreclose on it, Thompson clarified. According to them, they registered ownership of all Class 3 nitrogen-oxygen atmospheres in this sector about 12 million years ago. They're here to collect our atmosphere? Chinese Ambassador Liu looked like she was developing a migraine. Do they realize we're using it? The Velaxian response to this obvious concern was to send their chief negotiator, a crystalline being who called himself the most transparent one, a title that proved hilariously ironic, given how oblique their actual intentions were. The negotiations at Geneva went about as well as you'd expect when one party believes they own the air and the other party is quite attached to breathing it. Perhaps the most transparent one suggested, his crystalline form refracting sunlight across the conference room. "You misunderstand. We are not unreasonable. We will allow you to lease your atmosphere back from us for a mere 90% of your planet's resources." President Roberts of the United States stood up, his face a fascinating shade of purple. "Let me get this straight. You want us to pay rent for our air with our resources to you, because of a claim you filed before our species evolved?" "Precisely." The alien negotiator brightened literally, his crystal structure gleaming. "I'm pleased we understand each other." That's when things really went sideways. Some genius in military intelligence decided to test whether the Velaxians were bluffing by launching a warning shot at one of their smaller ships. The shot passed straight through it, which everyone thought was a good thing until they realized the Velaxians were crystalline beings who used light-based technology. We hadn't missed. We'd just given them a power boost. Their response was to demonstrate their ownership rights over Madagascar's airspace. One minute the island was there, the next it was surrounded by a vacuum bubble. The bubble lasted only seconds, but the message was clear. They could take our atmosphere piece by piece if they wanted to. The human military response was immediate and spectacularly ineffective. Fighter jets discovered that dogfighting with beings made of living crystal who could teleport was an exercise in futility. Nuclear deterrence proved equally useless. The Velaxians simply redirected the missiles into space, using them to power their ships. But something happened during those first chaotic weeks that the Velaxians didn't notice. While they were busy claiming victory after victory, humans were watching, learning, and most importantly, laughing. Because here's the thing about humans, we cope with terror through humor. Every defeat came with memes. Every setback spawned jokes. "Got air" became the resistance slogan, complete with t-shirts that some brave soul managed to mail to the Velaxian command ship. The aliens didn't understand why, even as they conquered major cities, humans kept making light of the situation. They didn't get why their threatening speeches were met with golf claps and scoring cards rating their dramatic delivery. They certainly didn't understand why Commander Hayes, during the fall of Washington, D.C., responded to their ultimate ultimatum by asking if their atmosphere repossession department had considered switching to Geico to save 15% or more on invasion insurance. What they never realized was that humans weren't laughing because we weren't taking them seriously. We were laughing because we had already spotted their biggest weakness. They were so convinced of their superiority that they never bothered to check if humans had figured out something they hadn't. The human resistance didn't form so much as it evolved, kind of like how you don't plan to grow mold in your fridge. It just happens when you forget about that mysterious Tupperware container for too long. Except in this case, the Tupperware was Earth and the mold was a highly organized network of people who really didn't appreciate being told they needed to pay rent for their atmosphere. Commander Hayes established the first cell in the ruins of Boston, operating out of an abandoned Dunkin' Donuts, because if anything screamed resistance headquarters, it was a place that had already resisted health inspectors for years. Dr. Chen joined next, bringing with her a team of quantum physicists who'd been working on something they called Project Lazarus long before the aliens arrived. When Hayes asked her to explain it, she just grinned and said, "Imagine if Schrodinger's cat not only survived the box but learned how to use it as a timeshare." Colonel Rodriguez brought military expertise and an uncanny ability to predict Velaxian patrol patterns, claiming he'd learned their habits by binge-watching crystal formation videos on YouTube. "They're literally living crystals," he explained while dodging alien surveillance. "They can't help but follow geometric growth patterns. It's like they're playing chess while we're playing Calvin ball." The resistance grew in unexpected places. Former baristas became communications experts because they already knew how to deal with entities that weren't morning people. Ex-retail workers proved exceptional at guerrilla warfare, having mastered the art of smiling while plotting revenge. But the real game-changer was Professor Thompson, an eccentric theoretical physicist who showed up one day wearing mismatched shoes and carrying a laptop held together with duct tape and optimism. "The Velaxians," he announced to the resistance leadership, "are idiots." He then proceeded to spill coffee on his laptop, curse in 3 languages, and deliver a lecture that changed everything. They think they're advanced because they can manipulate conventional physics, he explained, wiping coffee from his keyboard. But they're stuck in a one-dimensional understanding of reality. It's like they're proud of being able to drive in a straight line while ignoring the fact that they could also go up, down, or through last Tuesday. Project Lazarus turned out to be humanity's ace in the hole. While the Velaxians were busy playing with their advanced technology, humans had been quietly breaking physics in ways that would make Einstein need a drink. The research facility, hidden beneath an abandoned mini-golf course, the windmill was actually a quantum antenna, housed technology that didn't just think outside the box, it questioned whether the box existed in the first place. Here's our advantage, Dr. Chen explained to the Resistance Council, pointing to what looked like a cross between a coffee maker and a Rubik's Cube. The Velaxians understand the laws of physics perfectly. That's their weakness. They follow rules. Humans, we treat physics more like guidelines. The resistance grew stronger not because they outgunned the aliens, they didn't, or because they had better technology, debatable, but because humans had mastered something the Velaxians couldn't comprehend, creative chaos. While the aliens were looking for military bases, humans were running operations out of food trucks. When they scanned for weapons factories, they missed the 3D printing network operating out of public libraries. They searched for command centers but never thought to check the mini-golf courses. You know what's really going to bake their crystalline noodles? Hayes said during a strategy meeting. They don't know we've already won. They're so busy patting themselves on the back for conquering Earth, they haven't realized we're not fighting to push them back. We're fighting because we've figured out something they think is impossible. The Resistance had discovered that reality had a sense of humor, and like all good jokes, this one had a punchline the Velaxians wouldn't see coming until it was too late. Project Lazarus wasn't just another resistance operation, it was humanity's ultimate hold my beer moment, conceived decades before anyone knew we'd need it. Back in 1952, a group of physicists had gotten extremely drunk at a conference and decided to prove that quantum mechanics was, in their written words, being a bit of a show-off. Dr. Chen pulled up the original documentation on a screen that had definitely seen better days. They called it the Last Rule Protocol. Not because it was the final rule of physics, but because it was the last thing anyone would expect humans to figure out. And what exactly did our drunk scientist figure out? Hayes asked, examining what appeared to be cocktail napkin equations from the 1950s. Professor Thompson cleared his throat. They discovered that reality has a sense of humor. More specifically, they found out that quantum mechanics isn't just weird, it's weird because it's laughing at us. And if you know how to tell the joke right, you can make reality laugh so hard it hiccups. The gathered resistance leaders stared at him blankly. Look, Thompson continued, pulling up a hologram that showed what looked like a dance choreography for quantum particles. Everyone thinks quantum entanglement is about particles being connected. But what our drunk predecessors figured out is that it's more like particles getting together to pull pranks on physicists. They don't just influence each other, they're having a party, and we finally figured out how to spike the punch. Dr. Chen took over, her excitement barely contained. The Velaxians understand quantum mechanics perfectly. They can predict every particle's position, calculate every wave function, map every probability. But they're so focused on being right that they miss something humans discovered by accident. Reality has loopholes. Loopholes, Rodriguez repeated slowly, in reality. Exactly, Thompson exclaimed, accidentally knocking over his coffee for the third time that day. The universe runs on rules, but like any complex system, it has bugs, quantum glitches, cosmic coding errors, and humans, being the chaos monkeys we are, figured out how to exploit them. The Last Rule Protocol wasn't just about breaking physics, it was about convincing physics to take a coffee break. The quantum processor they'd built didn't just compute probabilities, it rewrote them. It was like having admin access to reality's source code. Hayes walked around the holographic display, watching simulated particles do things that would make Einstein need therapy. So how do we use this against the Velaxians? That's the beautiful part, Dr. Chen grinned. Remember how they claimed ownership of our atmosphere? They registered it as a Class 3 nitrogen-oxygen mixture under standard physics. But with this, she gestured to the quantum processor, we can locally redefine what standard means. The implications hit Hayes like a quantum brick. We can change the rules they're playing by. Better, Thompson laughed. We can change the game entirely. The Velaxians built their entire civilization on predictable physics. Their ships, their weapons, their very bodies rely on crystal structures that follow precise quantum rules. But what happens to a crystal structure when those rules suddenly decide to take a vacation? The resistance spent the next week gathering their remaining forces. Not that gathering was quite the right word when half your army technically existed in a quantum superposition of multiple locations simultaneously. They converted the mini golf course into a full command center, complete with a putting green that doubled as a quantum calibration device. Dr. Chen's team worked around the clock programming reality hacks into the quantum processor. They called it Operation Reality Check, a name that made Thompson snort coffee through his nose when he heard it. The processor is ready, Dr. Chen announced during the final briefing. Once activated, it will create a cascading quantum uncertainty field. Within its radius, physics becomes negotiable. Negotiable how? Rodriguez asked, eyeing the device suspiciously. You know how sometimes you put your keys down and they're not there when you look again, but then they show up in the first place you looked, Thompson explained. Like that, but weaponized, on a planetary scale. The remaining resistance fighters were briefed on what to expect, though expect was probably the wrong word for preparing people to fight in conditions where cause might follow effect, and probability had a sense of whimsy. Remember, Hayes addressed the assembled forces, the Velaxians think they've won because they're playing by the rules. They've calculated every possibility, planned for every conventional scenario. But they forgot one crucial detail about humanity. We've never met a rule we couldn't bend, break, or convince to look the other way, while we did something stupid yet brilliant. The quantum processor hummed in its chamber, reality already starting to get a bit fuzzy around its edges. Sensors showed Velaxian ships in orbit, still celebrating their victory, completely unaware that humans were about to introduce them to the cosmic equivalent of a practical joke. You know what the best part is, Thompson mused, watching the final preparations. When this works, the Velaxians will literally be unable to understand how we did it. Their minds are as crystalline as their bodies, rigid, structured, incapable of processing that sometimes the universe just needs to let its hair down and party. Hayes looked at the assembled troops, soldiers, scientists, and civilians who'd spent years fighting an enemy that thought they had everything figured out. Time to show them why you should never underestimate a species that turned hold my beer into a scientific principle. The day humanity decided to break reality started, appropriately enough, with someone breaking the coffee machine. Professor Thompson stared at the smoking ruins of what had once been the Resistance's last functioning espresso maker and declared it an omen. If we're already dealing with broken physics, he said, we might as well be under-caffeinated too. At exactly 3:14 p.m., because Dr. Chen had a flair for mathematical symbolism, Hayes activated the quantum processor. For a moment, nothing happened, which, according to Thompson, meant everything was working perfectly. Reality, he explained to the nervous resistance fighters, is like a rubber band. We're currently at the point where we've just let go of it. The snapback is going to be interesting. The first sign that something had changed came when a Velaxian patrol ship suddenly found itself flying upside down, relative to a down that no longer pointed in any consistent direction. The crystalline beings aboard spent several confused moments trying to figure out why their internal navigation systems were insisting they were simultaneously moving in all cardinal directions, including two that hadn't existed before. In orbit, the Velaxian fleet's triumphant formation began to unravel, literally in some cases, as ships discovered that the space between point A and point B now included a brief detour through last Thursday. Their crystalline technology, dependent on precise quantum interactions, started experiencing what could only be described as existential confusion. Status report, Hayes called out, watching the chaos unfold on monitors that were showing events slightly before they happened. The quantum uncertainty field is expanding exactly as planned, Dr. Chen replied, consulting a tablet that displayed readings in what appeared to be interpretive dance. The Velaxians are experiencing what humans would call a total system crash, except the system is reality itself. The Grand Archon's flagship, a massive crystalline structure that had previously hung over New York like a chandelier with delusions of grandeur, was the first to demonstrate the full effects. As the quantum field reached it, the ship's perfect geometric form began to experience suggestions. "Are they supposed to be doing that?" Rodriguez asked, pointing at the flagship, which was now trying to occupy the same space as itself from 3 different timelines. "They're not doing anything," Thompson grinned. "Physics is doing it to them. Their entire technology is based on quantum precision, absolute certainty in how particles will behave. We just introduced quantum physics to improv comedy." Across the planet, Velaxian forces found themselves dealing with a reality that had decided to take a vacation from conventional cause and effect. Their crystal-based weapons refused to fire, instead producing small bouquets of quantum possibilities. Their communication systems began broadcasting in languages that wouldn't be invented for another 1,000 years. The resistance fighters, briefed on what to expect, took full advantage of the chaos. They moved through the quantum uncertainty field like surfers riding waves of probability, their actions guided by intuition rather than logic. Where the Velaxians tried to impose order, humans embraced the chaos. "They're retreating," Rodriguez announced, watching as the alien fleet attempted to execute an emergency departure. "Although some of them are retreating backward through time, and I think that ship over there is retreating sideways through possibility space." The Grand Archon's voice boomed across all frequencies, though due to quantum uncertainty, it arrived 3 minutes before he started speaking. "What have you done? This defies all physical laws." "Actually," Hayes responded, his voice somehow managing to sound both before and after the Archons, "it perfectly follows physical laws, just not the ones you're used to. Turns out reality is more of a choose-your-own-adventure book than a rulebook." The Velaxian response was cut short as their flagship discovered that crystalline structures and quantum uncertainty got along about as well as cats and vacuum cleaners. The once perfect geometric forms began to experience what Dr. Chen would later describe in her papers as quantum jazz improvisation. "Should we push our advantage?" Rodriguez asked, watching the Velaxian fleet dissolve into quantum possibilities. Hayes shook his head. "No need. They're about to learn the most important rule of dealing with humans. Never assume your understanding of the universe is complete, especially when dealing with a species that turned breaking physics into an art form." As if to prove his point, the quantum processor hiccuped, causing a brief moment where probability itself took a coffee break. In that instant, every Velaxian ship simultaneously occupied every possible position they could have retreated to, creating what looked like the universe's first attempt at abstract art using spaceships as medium. "You know what the real victory is?" Thompson mused, watching the Velaxian fleet try to figure out which version of reality they should exist in. "They came here thinking they owned the atmosphere. Now they're leaving because they can't even be certain which direction space is supposed to be." Dr. Chen checked her readings one last time. "The quantum field has stabilized, though I should mention that stable now means something slightly different than it did this morning." The Galactic Council's emergency session was a sight to behold, primarily because it kept shifting between 3 different possible versions of itself. The Grand Archon, his crystalline form now slightly askew in dimensions that weren't supposed to exist, faced the assembled representatives of various spacefaring civilizations. "The humans," he began, his voice oscillating between frequencies as reality continued to hiccup, "have weaponized uncertainty itself." Commander Hayes stood at the podium, trying not to smile as several council members attempted to maintain their dignified poses while existing in quantum superposition. "Actually, we prefer to think of it as teaching physics to have a sense of humor." The council chamber erupted in multiple simultaneous versions of chaos. A representative of the Zygon Collective, a species that prided itself on logical precision, was having what appeared to be an existential crisis. "But you can't just tell quantum mechanics to take a break," the Zygons sputtered, all 7 of their probability states showing equal levels of distress. "Apparently," Dr. Chen chimed in from her position next to Hayes, "we can. And more importantly, we did, though I should note that can't is currently experiencing some definitional fluidity." The Velaxian Empire's position had shifted dramatically from their previous stance of demanding Earth's atmosphere Now they were primarily concerned with maintaining their own existence in a singular quantum state. "We are prepared to negotiate," the Grand Archon announced, trying to maintain his dignity, while simultaneously occupying 3 different heights. "Though we would appreciate if you could first stabilize reality in this chamber." Hayes pretended to consider this. "I don't know. Our atmosphere is quite comfortable in its current quantum uncertain state. We've grown rather fond of having air that exists in multiple probability states simultaneously. Makes breathing more interesting." Professor Thompson, who had insisted on attending despite the coffee machine being permanently quantum-locked in a state of both working and not working, couldn't resist adding, "You could say we've really gotten a breath of fresh possibilities." The council representatives watched in horror as humans actually laughed at quantum physics puns. It was becoming clear to the assembled aliens that they had severely underestimated not just human technological capabilities, but their fundamental approach to reality itself. "Let us be clear," Hayes continued, now standing at the podium which might or might not have been there. "Humanity is prepared to restore conventional physics to its normal operating parameters. But first, we need to establish some new ground rules." The negotiations that followed were unlike any in galactic history. The humans presented their terms with a casualness that terrified the Council more than any show of force could have. "First," Hayes announced, "all claims to Earth's atmosphere are hereby null and void, or potentially valid in an alternate timeline we don't care about. Your choice." "Second," Dr. Chen added, "humanity will be recognized as the leading authority on quantum mechanics, not because we understand it better, but because we're the only ones willing to take it out for drinks and show it a good time." And finally, Hayes concluded, "any future attempts to invade Earth will be met with similar, reality-bending responses. We've got plenty more physical constants we can turn into variables." The Galactic Council, faced with the prospect of a species that treated the fundamental laws of the universe as mere suggestions, unanimously accepted the terms. The Velaxian Empire, their once mighty fleet still trying to exist in consistent dimensions, officially recognized Earth's independence and sovereignty over its own atmosphere. As the council session concluded, the Grand Archon approached Hayes privately. "How?" he asked, his crystalline form shimmering with confusion. "How did your species discover this capability?" Hayes smiled. "Let me tell you a secret about humans. We've never looked at the impossible and asked, can we do this? Instead, we ask, what happens if we try? And sometimes reality is so surprised by our audacity that it forgets to tell us no." The quantum processor was powered down, allowing conventional physics to reassert itself across Earth and its surrounding space. Though occasionally, usually around 3:14 p.m., reality would still hiccup, a reminder that the universe had learned to laugh along with humanity. "You know what the best part is?" Thompson mused during the victory celebration, nursing a cup of coffee that existed in a quantum superposition of both caffeinated and decaf. "We've completely redefined what it means to win a galactic war. The Velaxians came expecting a battle of technology and strength. Instead, they got a crash course in why you should never challenge a species that turned breaking reality into a science." 6 months after the Velaxian retreat, Earth had gained an interesting reputation in galactic society. Alien tourists would visit just to experience what they called quantum uncertainty zones, small areas where physics still took occasional vacations. The mini golf course became particularly popular, especially the 7th hole, where your ball could simultaneously get a hole-in-one and miss entirely. Commander Hayes stood at the newly established Galactic Embassy, watching a group of crystalline Velaxian diplomats cautiously navigate around a quantum uncertain fountain that flowed in several directions at once, including backward through time. "You'd think they'd be used to it by now," Dr. Chen remarked, joining him at the window. Her lab coat now sported quantum-resistant patches after an incident involving a temporarily confused coffee spill. "They're still trying to understand how we did it," Hayes replied. "The Galactic Council has assigned 12 different research teams to study human quantum mechanics. They're all reaching the same conclusion. We shouldn't be able to do what we did." Professor Thompson, who had finally fixed the coffee machine, though it now occasionally served beverages from parallel universes, shuffled through his notes. "That's the beauty of it. They're so focused on understanding how we broke physics that they're missing the real question." "Which is?" Rodriguez asked, entering with reports from the new human-led Galactic Physics Commission. Thompson grinned. They never asked why physics let us break it in the first place. Hayes raised an eyebrow. Are you suggesting? Think about it, Thompson continued, excitement building in his voice. Of all the species in the galaxy, why did quantum mechanics decide to play along with our ridiculous ideas? Why does reality itself seem to have a soft spot for human absurdity? Dr. Chen's eyes widened as the implications hit her. You mean, the universe has a favorite species, Thompson declared triumphantly, and it's the one that made it laugh. As if to confirm his theory, reality hiccuped one last time. The quantum processor, safely deactivated and stored in a secure facility, briefly hummed to life. In labs across the galaxy, alien scientists' instruments recorded a strange phenomenon. For just a moment, every quantum particle in the observable universe arranged itself into what looked suspiciously like a wink. Hayes looked out at the stars, thinking about the future of humanity in a galaxy that had learned to fear not their weapons or their technology, but their unique ability to find loopholes in reality itself. You know what this means? He asked, trying to keep a straight face. Dr. Chen nodded, already starting to laugh. The universe doesn't just have rules. It has a sense of humor, Hayes finished, and humanity finally learned how to tell the ultimate cosmic joke.